Welcome to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. And on tonight's show, Speaker Johnson survives an attempt to vacate his office. Meanwhile, President Biden gives a rare interview, and the Laken Riley murder suspect is indicted. Well, before we get into the news, joining me once again is Ian Patrick. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you so much, Rennie. It's a pleasure to be doing the news with you again. And as a matter of fact, you mentioned that news about the Speaker surviving an ousting attempt. So why don't we start with that big news coming out of the House of Representatives, which voted overwhelmingly, as I said, to table a motion which would have ousted Speaker Mike Johnson. 359 House Republicans and Democrats rejected Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's motion to vacate. But 11 Democrats and 32 Republicans did side with Greene, who also threatened Johnson with removal over his role in passing controversial federal spending and foreign aid bills. Greene accused the Speaker as well of being weak and of playing into a uniparty position, not one for Republicans.
The form of the resolution is as follows: declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. This is the uniparty for the American people watching. Our elected Republican Speaker, Mike Johnson, has aided and abetted the Democrats and the Biden administration in destroying our country.
After surviving the vote, Johnson looked forward to what he said was getting beyond this sort of behavior in the current Congress.
Hopefully, this is the end of the personality politics and the frivolous character assassination that has defined the 118th Congress. It's regrettable. It's not who we are as Americans, and we're better than this. We need to get beyond it.
This, of course, marks the second time within a year that Republicans aimed to boot their own Speaker in the House. The previous ouster against former Speaker Kevin McCarthy obviously proved a bit more successful than this recent attempt.
Meanwhile, President Biden sat down with CNN's Aaron Burnett for a rare one-on-one interview yesterday. The largely one-way discussion received much flack for letting Biden off the hook with no challenging questions and little fact-checking. What stood out to most critics, however, was how the president touted his economic achievements amidst historic inflation. Take a look.
No president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. For 65% of the American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. The idea that we're in a situation where things are so bad, the folks that, we've created more jobs. We're in a situation where people have access to good paying jobs.
When Biden took office, inflation was 1.4%, not 9%, as the president had claimed earlier. Biden also claimed that he has never failed creating jobs, unlike his predecessor, former President Trump, for which he received no pushback. Of course, this doesn't come as a surprise. Former ESPN anchor Sage Steele admitted on the Megyn Kelly show recently that her 2021 interview with the president was completely scripted.
But I will say in that interview, President Biden did expound upon his recent decision to withhold future weapons deliveries to Israel, giving us a little more context as to his thinking behind that. When asked to clarify his position, Biden vowed to block these deliveries if Israel invades Rafah, adding that he's prepared to condition future support for America's longtime ally on its actions in Gaza.
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. And I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks, but it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah, artillery shells.
Of course, beyond just that interview, the announcement itself came as a surprise to many, and that includes Republican leaders in Congress. Speaker Johnson and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell sent a letter to Biden yesterday expressing alarm over his decision. The leaders wrote that, quote, security assistance to Israel is an urgent priority that must not be delayed. They also demanded details about the decision by the end of the week. Meanwhile, during an interview with Fox News, Speaker Johnson said Biden was defying the will of Congress.
This idea of withholding weapons to Israel as a condition of somehow, Joe Biden wanted to micromanage their war effort over there, their defensive effort, is catastrophic policy. It would be devastating to our closest ally in the region, and it would go directly against the will of what the members of this body voted on just several days ago. So they have got to answer to the American people and answer to us, and we're on that right now.
Elsewhere, as universities are forced to deal with the consequences of anti-Semitic protests, K-12 administrators are also coming under scrutiny. School district leaders from New York City, Berkeley, California, and Montgomery County, Maryland, testified at a subcommittee hearing yesterday about anti-Semitic behavior within their school districts. Republican Representative Aaron Bean said the officials have been accused of doing nothing and turning a blind eye to anti-Semitic behavior. Chancellor David Banks from New York fired back.
What I said was very clear. We suspended a number of students who were the leaders at Hillcrest High School, number one. Number two, we removed the principal of that school for a lack of leadership and oversight. I don't know how to make it much clearer. Okay. I condemn clearly what happened at Hillcrest was a complete act of anti-Semitism. It will not stand on my watch.
Board President Carla Silvestri from Maryland also emphasized her school district's commitment to combat anti-Semitism.
Our partnerships with our community organizations bring expertise, cultural expertise that maybe some of our school leaders do not have. And so they help enhance the work that we do with our, in this case, a hate bias action plan. We have 12 different community groups from various perspectives to help us get it right. We want to get it right, and these community groups will help us do that.
However, the problem doesn't start with violent anti-Semitism. Family Research Council's Matt Kilgannon argues that the issue is deeply rooted in the public education system itself.
The foundation is laid in high school and in elementary school as well.
Where's that coming from?
The fact that we are in many ways a post-religious America, unfortunately, and the fact that the elementary schools and high schools are using an oppressor-oppressed kind of a paradigm.
So the Marxist.
Absolutely.
And while we're on the topic of education, why don't we get some updates to the campus protests, which are now reaching 3 weeks. And D.C. police have now cleared an anti-Israel encampment from George Washington University just yesterday. Dozens were arrested for trespassing and assault, and it came hours before city officials were actually set to be grilled by hostile lawmakers to account for their handling of these protests. Notably, police rejected the university's request for assistance in ending the protest. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser says the protest has become more volatile since then as well.
I had the opportunity to speak with Chairman Comer this morning, and he expressed his interest in making sure the city and the chief could focus on this ongoing operation. I expect that hearing will be pulled down.
The committee chairman canceled the hearing following that conversation, but not without a final warning shot. Comer wrote, quote, "It was unfortunate that the situation at GW forced the Oversight Committee to act. However, it was apparent that the D.C. police force was not going to do their job." And to date, more than 2,600 arrests have been made on college campuses nationwide, and now even high schoolers are joining with organized sit-ins and walkouts.
And as a response to all that, a new Republican-led bill suggests sending anti-Israel protesters to Gaza for 6 months. Representative Andy Ogles introduced the bill yesterday.
If you're part of these anti-Semitic protests on college campuses and you are guilty of a crime, you can do your community service in Gaza. That's right. If you love Hamas so much, you can go over there and give them food. You can hand out humanitarian aid.
The bill would apply to all unlawful activity on college campuses after October 7, 2023. It's backed by Congressman Jeff Duncan, who says that the wannabe terrorists should see what it's like to live in a terrorist regime state. However, the bill is not likely to pass the House despite growing bipartisan critiques of the anti-Semitic protests. And speaking of the war in Gaza, we'll cover more on that and other international news when we come back from this break.
Many mothers find strength in the experience of giving birth as they overcome physical challenges and embrace the journey of bringing a new life into the world. You can help an abortion-minded mother receive discipleship, encouragement, and the strength needed to have her baby. During the month of May, you can bless your mom for Mother's Day by giving to Preborn on your mother's behalf. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM.
When it comes to money, I always have so many questions. I never know where to go to get answers to those questions. They never really teach you this stuff in school, like some of the best ways to handle it, how to save, when to invest, where to invest, even just what to do with the money. And if I put it in the stock market, what's the best way to protect from losing it all? That fear can be paralyzing. You don't really know what decisions to make. As a Christian, I don't want to give my money to people who are going to use it for things that God hates. When I discovered financial issues, it was like a burden was lifted off my shoulders. Not only did I gain access to a simple investment strategy that I can manage myself, I also have the peace of mind that my money will not be going to companies that actively promote things that God hates. Financial issues has allowed me to experience peace in my investments.
Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she's faced with a difficult decision. Preborn connects with life-affirming pregnancy clinics across the nation and provides them with free ultrasound sessions for expectant mothers. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears their heartbeat, it doubles the chance she'll choose life. Visit preborn.com/life to save a baby's life.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue with the plight of Christians in the war-torn Gaza Strip. The Baptist Press reports that during Easter, one Baptist leader said that his church was too tired to suffer and living became very difficult and described the situation as useless. Since then, he has fled to Egypt while the IDF set up camp at the church's remains, according to the former pastor of that church. The International Christian Concern said that many Christians ended up fleeing the area as well. This led the organization to speculate that there will be no more Christian presence left in Gaza. ICC said in a recent statement, quote, "They are faced with the dilemma of staying and helping others rebuild or leaving to join relatives abroad and start a new life elsewhere. For now, many are deciding to leave." The organization estimates that between 25% and 50% of the remaining 1,000 Christians in the area have left Gaza already, while an additional 25% are applying to leave right now.
And while we're still in that part of the world, Yemen's Houthi rebels on Thursday claimed responsibility for yet another set of missile attacks on ships. This time, the Houthis claimed 2 missile attacks in the Gulf of Aden, and the targets were 2 Panama-flagged container ships, identified as the MSC Diego and MSC Gina. Miraculously, there was no report of damage or casualties on either ship, as the attacks actually missed the vessels themselves. The Joint Maritime Information Center, which is a coalition led by the United States, confirmed the attacks and said that they actually occurred earlier this week on Tuesday. The center also said these ships were likely targeted due to perceived Israeli affiliation. The Houthis insist that their attacks on naval vessels in the Red Sea area will continue as long as the war in Gaza goes on. They claim these attacks are to show solidarity with the Palestinian people.
At the same time, Iran issued a dire threat earlier today to change its nuclear bomb policy if threatened. The nation's supreme leader told Iranian media that the military is not planning to build a nuclear bomb. However, he warned that this could change if Iran is threatened. In his words, quote, "There will be no choice but to change our military doctrine." Tehran banned the development of nuclear weapons earlier this century. However, officials have more recently hinted they will reverse that stance amid building pressure with Western nations over its nuclear program. Tensions reached their highest point in April after Iran launched nearly 300 retaliatory missiles and drones against Israel. Jerusalem responded in mid-April with a smaller but precise airstrike.
Let's focus now on the nation of China, which recently their president visited Serbia, and both of them agreed to strengthen ties with a new cooperation pact. Chinese President Xi Jinping says the Balkan nation is the first European country which Beijing will build a shared future with. In all, the country signed 29 agreements to foster cooperation in everything regarding legal, regulatory, and economic matters. Notably, it marks the first free trade agreement between Beijing and a European nation as well. China is the largest investor in Serbia after lending billions to improve their infrastructure, and it's the first European tour in 5 years for the Chinese president, which has appeared to focus on winning allies at the edge of the European Union. Xi is spending today and tomorrow in Hungary, which has seen a surge in Chinese-owned businesses over the past 2 years. And according to Budapest, there are 16 agreements on the table in order to promote greater cooperation in infrastructure, nuclear energy, and the automotive industry.
Meanwhile, Mexico is tightening its travel rules on Peruvians amid an influx of new migrants trying to travel through the country. According to the Associated Press, Mexico began requiring visas from Peruvians on Monday, which effectively eliminated the possibility of flying to a Mexican city near the U.S. border. The U.S. has welcomed the decision and called the visa requirements an important step towards a joint effort to crack down on illegal immigrants. But critics are saying that the solution doesn't work long term. They cite Mexico's similar decision regarding Venezuelan migrants who traveled in droves to the U.S. even after the restriction was enacted. The U.S. first started seeing Peruvian migrants across the border in 2022, and Border Patrol arrested 5,300 migrants per month last year, which dipped to about 3,400 migrants in the past few months after Mexico started cracking down on migrants. And when we return, we'll take a look at some national coverage. But first, let's go to FISM Seth Udinsky for a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, in the late 1990s, Major League Baseball was booming. The boom came largely as the result of a resurgence of home runs. Baseballs were flying left and right off the bats of a new surge of muscular superstars, including Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Jose Canseco, Jason Giambi, Barry Bonds, and Jeff Bagwell, to name a few. But in the first 2 decades of the 21st century, investigations into the game revealed something of a mass cover-up of widespread steroid usage by countless stars in what will be the greatest scandal in baseball since the 1919 Black Sox betting scandal. Now, keep in mind, there's some speculation as to why and how this scandal came to be, but here's my take based on my research. The scandal itself actually began in the late 80s and early 90s with 2 separate black marks on baseball. The first was Pete Rose's allegation that he had bet on baseball games, that he'd been involved in them, which resulted in his lifetime banishment from the game. Now, the second and more important black mark came a few years later in 1994 with the players' strike, where owners and players could not come to a collective bargaining agreement. As such, the final 2 months of the season were wiped out, and including, for the first time since its birth in 1903, the cancellation of the World Series. So baseball needed some positive PR. Not only had it lost money, it had also lost good faith, good graces with baseball fans, and it found exactly what it needed in the previously mentioned force of new superstars who were tearing the cover off the ball. Now, in baseball, you have to understand fans love home runs. They love a good moonshot off the bat, and they got it in the late 90s, specifically in 1998 when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa battled to break Roger Maris's single-season record of 61 home runs. McGwire got to 62 first and won the final chase with 70, beating Sammy Sosa's 66. 3 years later, Barry Bonds broke McGwire's record at 73. But during these years at the turn of the century, writers and fans noticed something, the massive size of these stars, and they started to question if something fishy was afoot. Sure enough, many stars, virtually all the players I just mentioned, were using illegal performance-enhancing drugs during their playing days. After his playing career was over, Jose Canseco, one of the chief users, wrote a tell-all in which he claimed over 80% of all Major League sluggers at this time used PEDs during what historians now call the steroid era. Now, though some disputed Canseco's claims, many believe them to be true, especially in the years that followed, as numerous stars who had denied usage during their careers eventually admitted that they did in fact use PEDs. Now, as a final note of intrigue, many believe Major League Baseball knowingly turned a blind eye to this problem. It was only when its hand was forced, after many of the suspected users had retired, that baseball established a much stricter drug policy that brought suspensions and fines for first-time users and for continual users, lifetime banishment from the game. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay, or to go, to remain the same, or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
For $28, you can sponsor an ultrasound scan that will enable an abortion-minded woman to hear the heartbeat of her baby. 90% of the time when this happens, that sound will change a woman's mind and cause her to keep the baby. And guess what? An anonymous donor is matching your gift. For every 200 scans underwritten, an ultrasound machine will be purchased and placed in a life-saving preborn clinic. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give today. That's preborn.com/FISM.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Ian Patrick. Let's continue our coverage with some national news, starting with an update to the Laken Riley case that took America by storm. The suspect in the February slaying of the Georgia nursing student was charged with her murder yesterday. That suspect is Jose Antonio Ibarra, an illegal immigrant from Venezuela. He's facing 10 counts, including murder, attempted rape, kidnapping, and aggravated battery. But Ibarra is also accused of peeping Tom behavior for peering through a window and spying on a staff member of the university, ironically the same day that he's accused of murdering Riley. The suspect's status as an illegal immigrant catapulted this case to a national level as conservative lawmakers directly attributed her death to President Biden's failed border policies.
Meanwhile, GOP senators are voicing their disapproval of a new perk extended to DACA recipients by the Biden administration. Senators Marsha Blackburn, Mike Lee, J.D. Vance, and Kevin Cramer wrote a letter to the Department of Health and Human Services rejecting its new healthcare coverage for illegal immigrants under the Dreamers program. The letter said, quote, "In Biden's economy, inflation is on the rise while job growth is slowing down. Unemployment is at a 2-year high and foreign-born workers are flooding the workforce." They added, quote, "Struggling American taxpayers are already on the hook for the cost of housing and welfare for illegal immigrants. And now, with this misguided rule, President Biden is asking these same hardworking, taxpaying Americans to foot the bill for illegal immigrants' health care." The lawmakers are now asking HHS Secretary Javier Becerra to testify before Congress to outline in greater detail this plan to provide taxpayer-funded health care to DACA recipients.
Still on news related to the border crisis, some undocumented migrants are now apparently holding a state government hostage, or a city government, I should say. For example, a group of illegal immigrants in Denver, Colorado have set up an encampment in the city and are refusing to leave without a satisfied list of demands. Local reporting suggests that this camp has existed for weeks now. Denver Human Resources had offered to put the migrants up into city-funded shelters in exchange for disassembling the encampment. But the migrants say they were cheated out of another deal with Human Services and have instead issued 13 demands for them to acquiesce. Some of these demands include things like fresh, culturally appropriate ingredients to cook their own food, unlimited shower access, regular medical checkups, and some other services, including transportation and support in finding employment. Denver claims that their offers satisfy most, if not all, of these demands already, and the city has consistently sent buses to the encampment to transport the migrants to these shelters, but so far to no avail.
And the House GOP unveiled a bill to bar illegal immigrants from voting yesterday. House Speaker Mike Johnson introduced the act nearly a month after he first signaled that he would push to have individuals provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote.
There is currently an unprecedented and a clear and present danger to the integrity of our election system. And that is the threat of non-citizens and illegal aliens voting in our elections.
According to the House Speaker, hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants could vote in November. The current law only requires proof of identity, like a driver's license or social security number, when registering to vote. Republicans say that doesn't go far enough. Representative Chip Roy says that the U.S. needs to guarantee that only citizens can vote in federal elections.
We're here for the simple proposition, supported by the vast majority of the American people, that only citizens of the United States should vote, that we should have documentary proof, that we should have a system to guarantee that only citizens of the United States vote in federal elections, where we have the clear authority under the Constitution of the United States and our laws as Congress to set the terms of those elections.
And while we're on the topic of elections, states are apparently scrambling to overcome the deepfake and artificial intelligence threats before 2024 is upon us. That threat has officially already been seen after a robocall with a falsified message from President Biden warned New Hampshire residents not to vote in the primaries earlier this year. But Arizona is now fighting back with a groundbreaking 2-day training program that makes election administrators face different deepfake scenarios. Arizona's Secretary of State describes one of these situations.
It said basically, hey, this is so-and-so, and it sounded exactly like that person. We've got a little bit of a glitch in our system. We need to get your login and password for this particular sector of the system so that we can double check some stuff. Give me a call back. Give me a call back at this number, and we'll get that right away. We'll get it plugged in. We're calling everybody.
Another scenario uses his likeness and voice to craft a welcome video as a warning for how realistic these deep fakes can sometimes be. Those have since been destroyed, but the state isn't satisfied in just keeping all of this training to themselves. Arizona publicly released a report to help poll workers across the nation. They're also organizing an event in Michigan with the same purpose. And in related news, around 40 states have passed or are working to pass bills that require transparency on the use of AI-generated content. Others step up penalties for the malicious spreading of misleading or deceptive information.
And lastly, several pregnancy centers are inviting Vice President Kamala Harris and President Biden to check out what they do. The National Institute of Family and Life Advocates wrote a letter saying the Biden-Harris duo are welcome to take a tour of any pregnancy center across the country to see how these organizations care for mothers with unplanned or difficult pregnancies. President and founder of the organization, Thomas Glessner, argued, quote, Vice President Kamala Harris made history when she publicly visited an abortion clinic earlier this year, and we'd like to show her what the other side of choice looks like by inviting her to one of our 1,700-member pregnancy centers. Glessner added, quote, both Vice President Harris and our pregnancy centers want to help women, and we invite her to see another point of view on how to go about accomplishing that mission. Very clever indeed. And before we finish today's show, I would like to remind our viewers once again to support Preborn Ministries this month. For as little as $28, you can provide another ultrasound scan. To learn more, go to preborn.com/FISM. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more updates, and we'll see you again soon tomorrow.